Good morning and welcome to the Chamber Business Report. I'm John Phillips, president of the Palm Coast Flagler Regional Chamber of Commerce. And our guest this week on the Chamber Business Report is Brian McMillan, who is the publisher of The Observer. Brian, good morning. Welcome aboard. Glad to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You are certainly no stranger to the studios of Flagler Radio and WNZF, and glad to have you on the Chamber Business Report. And again, to remind our listeners, the Chamber Business Report is brought to you by Klein Construction, building the future of Flagler County for the past 30 years. Smart technologies, they make business simple. Intercoastal Bank of Palm Coast, community banking the way it should be, member FDIC, and Katz & Green, Flagler County's personal injury attorneys since 1996. Again, our guest is Brian McMillan with The Observer, and I say The Observer because some folks might say the Palm Coast Observer, which you do have.
We do.
But there's also other observers out there. Before we talk about the different editions of The Observer, I just want to talk a little bit personal. Your background, where you grew up, how you ended up here in Flagler County, and ultimately how you took over publishing and owning and operating the Observer.
Yeah, obviously there's always more detail, trying not to bore anybody, but I grew up in Connecticut. I had a very happy, stable growing up years. Family life was great. My parents are still, I actually spoke with my mother this morning. I call her every week. And she and my father are actually serving a mission for our church in South Africa right now.
Wow.
So that's something that's very, very cool. Faith has always been a big part of my life. And so, yeah, if you were to trace, I guess I thought I was going to be a Major League Baseball player when I was a kid.
Didn't we all?
That didn't work out too well, but I did my best to at least collect as many baseball cards as I could. As far as like newspaper, being, what were the early signs that was of interest to me? We always got the Hartford Courant every day, and I would read it every day because I would start with the baseball scores and the comics, and I just got interested in the narratives of the news all around, and it's kind of a weird thing growing up. My in my dining room there was a huge map of Europe on the wall. I have no idea why my dad did that, but I was sitting there, eating my Fruit Loops and reading the newspaper and, looking at the shapes of all the countries on, and there was a lot of turmoil in Europe. And so it was interesting to, looking back on that, there's just little things that shape you a little bit. So, I went to Brigham Young University in Utah. I got the New York Times there. I didn't really think I was going into newspapers at that time. When I went on a mission also for my church and got married. And right before I was going to graduate, I was still going pre-law at that point, and just decided it didn't really feel like the right fit, and decided to try sports journalism as kind of like, I wanted to be a baseball beat writer, let's say. So I tried that. I sent out resumes. I got hired by a little newspaper in Florida, called the East County Observer, which is near Sarasota, Manatee County, and started in general news, but quickly went into sports, and just had a really good experience there. I ended up going to grad school, but that's kind of like one of the big lessons that I learned at that point was do the best you can, don't burn bridges, just try to do a good job of where you are, because after grad school, the owner of that newspaper called me and said, we're going to start a new one in Palm Coast. Would you like to come and be the first managing editor of that newspaper? And so my wife, and at that point we had 3 children at that point, we moved to Palm Coast, and I was the first managing editor of the Palm Coast Observer, and John Walsh was the co-owner and the local public face of it. And so yeah, I was the editor for long time, for about 12 years, took a break away from, try something else, but came back, and my wife and I bought the paper 2 years ago about that. So
that is good information to know. I've known you for a little while, and I certainly know the Observer background, but I didn't know the story of how you got here. Mm-hmm. When you were over on the west coast of Florida, there, Sarasota, Manatee County, covering sports, doing the spring training circuit over there.
Not really.
Or,
I mean, it's still hyper local, so it was really
Okay.
all about the high school sports.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that was a fun experience. One of the little high schools. It's just such a cool thing to get so connected to what you're covering. Like one of the high schools there told me afterward that, you know, some of the guys on some of the sports teams, it's such a small school, they're on all the sports teams, but at their senior celebration, they had this bowling tournament and everyone had to come up with their team name. And this one group of guys who's on all the sports teams, their team name was the Brian McMillans because I was the one who kind of made him famous, you know, to their peers. And that was a long time ago, you know, when I was, you know, mid-20s.
Those are the glory days, though.
Exactly.
When you're covering the local team, whether you know at the high school level,
they like you.
Yeah, if you are in the paper, you're the big man on campus.
Exactly.
And, so that is great. So it's always been really, even though you were reading the New York Times and you're reading the Hartford paper, your experience has really all been in local journalism.
Yeah. When I've never worked for any other newspaper company besides the Observer, you know? So, and it's funny because I was hired by them in, you know, around 2004, rehired in 2010, and then came back again and bought the paper in 2023 or so. So, basically 3 times back into the Observer. But
well, that's good. And the brand that you have grown up, and I say grown up not literally as in terms of age, but grown up as a businessman in your work experience, is hyper local, and that's exactly what the Observer is.
Mm-hmm.
And you've had great success here with the quote unquote Palm Coast Observer, but now there's a new Observer out there, and there are hopefully more additions to the Observer coming soon. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So in Palm Coast started in 2010. In 2012, John Walsh launched the Ormond Beach Observer, and I was the editor of that as well. And there's some economies of scale, so you know, it kind of makes sense to kind of grow. Each paper is necessarily pretty. It's always going to be kind of small because it's only interesting to the people in that little town. So I think as far as the success of a business, just like a lot of businesses, is to figure out how to scale it and grow that way. So, and that's what they did in Sarasota area. They you know, this was one of their properties at one point, you know, number 10 or number 12. So, when Haley and I, my wife and I, took over this company, and she's the operations manager, design manager. She
truly a family
She
business.
works very hard and does a lot for making this work. But we decided to start other smaller editions. When I say a smaller edition, what I mean is that there is a lot of shared content between the papers. If people read the paper now, I'm sure you see that sometimes there is like Ormond Beach news stories sometimes, and
Sure.
Volusia things here and there. So our goal is to eventually grow to the point where we crowd everything else out besides only what's in your city. That's kind of the ultimate goal. So we started the Hammock Observer a month ago. So this is volume 1, number 4, I think was this week. And so it has like a cover story that's focused on the hammock. And on the inside, there's a hammock specific page. And we tease that heavily on page 1 of the hammock. Whereas sometimes that content will be in Palm Coast. Sometimes it might not. But, you know, we swap them out here and there. And the goal is to start the Daytona Beach Observer. So we actually have, you know, we've been talking to a lot of different people. I would say that it's an encouraging amount of interest in trying to reach we're going to start with a kind of about 1,000 papers in the LPGA Margaritaville area to start. And so we're looking for like front page sponsor that can get into Ormond, Daytona, and kind of like, you know, grow those together essentially. But once we get Daytona off the ground, my goal is to then refocus on Flagler more and try to start a Flagler Beach and a Bunnell Observer someday. So, I mean, I hope that can both happen in 2026, Flagler Beach and Bunnell. That's the hope. But
that's fantastic. And that goes back to the business model of, you know, starting out with some crossover and scaling, and some of the articles that are important in the hammock. A lot of those are important in Palm Coast and vice versa. Mm-hmm. But there is some news that is hammock based that the hammock people want to see on the front page. And same with Palm Coast.
Yeah.
And ultimately, hopefully it works out in Bunnell and Flagler Beach, and what you've done in Ormond Beach, which happens to be where I live. So I'm more familiar with the Ormond paper at my home, and more familiar with the Palm Coast Observer in my work. But I do see some growth opportunities there in Daytona as the Daytona Beach News Journal has kind of transitioned. It used to be a local paper that covered local news, and they really don't do that any longer because it was outsourced and sold to a large company. And they're I'm not trying to throw shade at Daytona Beach Newsroom, but they're missing the mark locally quite often compared to what they used to do. And I think there's a wonderful opportunity for you to step in and fill that, and hopefully the business model works out for you.
Yeah, I think that the News Journal is still a valuable part of the community. I mean, I do hear negativity about it sometimes because it has withdrawn quite a bit from local, but there is still local news in it. And I would never tell someone, hey, don't ever read the News Journal.
Sure.
Don't advertise in the News Journal. Like, the businesses should try to advertise as many places as they can to get their word out. But yeah, our focus is going to be, purely local and on our website and on our in print.
Well, you bring up the News Journal, and that's a great opportunity for us to segue into complementary businesses in local media. Obviously, we're recording this show on WNZF. We're in what some people might think is a competing media, but it really isn't. Your media in print and online versus the news that is received through the airwaves or through a podcast or through YouTube or even some of the other competitors like Flagler Live. I think you've taken an approach, and again, I want to give you a chance to talk about it as opposed to me telling you what I think you do, how you view those as complementary media sources and how you work together. Because you and Pierre and David all work together on the Free for All Friday show traditionally. Not sure you and Pierre are on there every week necessarily, but the vast majority, probably 90+% of the time, all three people are on the same show together.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, again, like, if my goal, our mission statement as a newspaper is to build bridges of understanding and build community spirit. That's kind of what our content is all about. And we also, try to help build the local economy by connecting readers to our businesses to our readers. And so if you really are sincere about that and we want to build bridges of understanding, then we would be cheering on everyone else who's doing the same thing. People are going to get informed. Our community is better when they're more informed. And if they hear about it on WNZF or they read about it in Flagler Live, then I hope that those goals are still accomplished in whatever way that we can. And so it's a tough business to be in. You get a lot of passionate people who are critical of what you do, and so I think I respect people who are in the news business, especially local media.
Yeah, I think I want to go back and repeat what you just said, because I think it's really important that our community gets better when the people are well informed, and that is one of your mission statements with the Observer, and I think you are delivering upon that each and every day. And we're going to take a break here for just a couple minutes, but I want to talk about when we come back how you are really community focused, and you've talked about that a little bit, but expand on that a little bit, and also how responsive you are. It's a family owned small paper that is very responsive to viewers' concerns, complaints, criticisms, and questions. And we'll talk more about that when we take this short time out. You're listening to the Chamber Business Report. I'm John Phillips, president of the Palm Coast Flagler Regional Chamber of Commerce, and we're visiting with Brian McMillan, who is the editor and publisher of the Observer newspaper. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Chamber Business Report. I'm John Phillips, president of the Palm Coast Flagler Regional Chamber of Commerce. And we're visiting with Brian McMillan from the Observer. And again, want to thank our sponsors, Klein Construction, Smart Technologies, Intercoastal Bank of Palm Coast, and also Katz and Green attorneys here in Palm Coast. And Brian, we were talking in the first segment there about how it is a small family-owned and operated business, but I want to expand on the chance that you are very responsive, and I've noticed it, and I asked you off the air before we started recording, but I'm going to give you a chance to address it here on the air. When people make comments to an Observer article on Facebook, and other places as well, but Facebook's probably the place where you can really make comments, you respond. And my question to you, and I'm going to give you a chance to talk about it on the air, is that you that responds, or is there a staff that you have? And I just want to talk about that, and how when someone has a comment, a complaint, a suggestion, you don't just ignore it and let people just write stuff. you actually get right back to them. So I want to give you a chance to talk more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably every business's goal is to try to be responsive. And I would say that I usually focus on like how I wish that we were doing more, focus on, it's easier to look at where you're falling short. But I have heard a lot of people mention that they've seen me responding on Facebook to people who have, usually what I do is when there's a sensitive political story, I do want to monitor the comments to see if one, people are making kind of wild claims or saying things that are false, because again, going back to the mission statement, build bridges of understanding. If there's something that's false that I have some information about, then it helps to build that bridge to say, well, actually, here's some more information that can help you, and try to be as polite and respectful as possible. Being a peacemaker is the goal, is the tone. And sometimes that's hard because people can get pretty belligerent sometimes. But my goal is to always be a friendly, peacemaking force on social media. And when people criticize the Observer and say like, oh, you're being biased, I don't go in there to it's different purposes, but the main goal is, again, just going back to the mission. If people in the community think that the Observer has some kind of bias or is trying to attack different politicians or to promote a certain agenda, then it weakens us as an institution. It makes it harder for us to accomplish our goal, which is to build bridges of understanding. If we're really just trying to focus on one side of the bridge and try to not mention the other, then that's a problem. So I do sometimes, while thanking people, say, if you really feel that we're being biased, please let me know, because I want to fix it as soon as I possibly can. And I'm being sincere in that. And I've offered to meet with people, and I sign my comments. Brian McMillan, publisher, I want it to be very transparent that I'm involved in it. And it's kind of unusual to have, I think, a stance. Like a lot of times, if there is a stance that a newspaper would take, it would be like promoting, conservative or liberal ideals. And in some ways, that's kind of more sellable. It's easier to kind of build up your base. But we're trying something that is more of a build bridges of understanding.
And I think you're doing that.
Peace.
That's your goal. That's your mission statement, and you live up to it every time. You are a community-based, factually based. You try to report the article, the story of what happened, whether it's a city commission, county council meeting, or whatever it might be. Most of them are politically, oriented in what you're reporting in the news, but you try to report the facts. And I think sometimes in the media business, people stand behind their story. I wrote the story, and I'm not going to respond to it. And you take the exact opposite approach, which I think goes back to your personal brand. Is you're a small town, local based paper with a small town, local based man running the organization with your wife by your side, and others. It's not that it's just the two of you, because you've got plenty of other people there. But you do treat it personally, and you're responsive. And I just want to give you credit for that. And I think I hope the people appreciate that, because I've read it, and you often say, if you think I've taken the wrong approach, tell me how I'm wrong here, or how I could have done it differently. And most of the time, people probably don't even get back, and they go, "Oh, yeah, you're probably right." So I applaud you for that. The other thing I want to give you a chance to talk about, because I know the promotion to do some fundraising for Flagler County Schools was ongoing, and it really hasn't ended. And basically, you can get the Observer free of charge at multiple locations around the local area. Yep. But if you subscribe, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, $52, $1 a week, you can get it in your driveway, and $20 of that $52 you're going to donate to Flagler County Schools, correct? Yeah, and that's not a donation on top of the subscription fee. It's we're taking then $32 for the subscription, and we're going to donate $20 of that money toward a cause. And we did it for about 5 weeks in June, beginning of July, and promoted the Grace Community Food Pantry in Palm Coast, and we donated $1,560, 78 subscriptions worth for $20 each. And I went in and delivered the check to Charles Solano and put that on the front page. Like that's community news to me, somewhat. Also promoting what we're doing, but
but yes, from now until about the end of October, we're going to use this as like the concept was like do it as a PTO fundraiser. So like Belterre Old Kings Elementary, they're always trying to raise some money for teachers and for help out students.
Yeah.
And so we think that $20 per sale is a pretty good return on that for a fundraiser, and that maybe it'll inspire some families to subscribe, and that way they're also getting connected to the community in another way by getting the paper every week on their driveway and reading about their own school, therefore, in the subscription. And then that you're also helping out the school. So I'm hoping that each school will be able to get a good check in October sometime. Maybe we'll do one in the middle to kind of spread the word again, and then
Absolutely.
do it again, something like that. But
yeah, and again, kind of putting your money where your mouth is. You're trying to support the local economy and the local schools, and that's one of the things that we subscribe to at the Chamber. People want to move their family or their business to a place where there are good education, safety. Those are probably the big two, and schools are the education side. Safety, we're really strong in that area. We do really well, and then a business focused, business friendly economy, which we seem to have here in Flagler County. We do have more opportunities for growth, and we're trying to attract more businesses. But ultimately, those first two things, safety and education, really are the first two measurement tools that you don't get the chance to get to the third question. Is there room for our business to move there if you can't answer the first two positively?
First. Right.
Exactly right. So I appreciate you doing that. Let's talk a little bit more, and without getting into too much of the details. I don't want to lose all of our listeners with the minutia. But from a business model, how closely are you monitoring analytics in terms of how many people click on this article versus that article to tell you as a publisher what stories we need to be telling?
Yeah, I think we do monitor that, and some of the biggest subjects that people click on is restaurants. People, that's always a big one, and then a lot of times it's stories that celebrate what people are doing, successes people are having, and a lot of times it's kind of the some controversial political things. But then there's also things that happen that are like, one of our biggest stories was about how some Bunnell police cars ended up being auctioned off to this. It ended up being this big YouTube presence, and that was like our story of the year, just because it went viral among those followers. So we're not going to always chase that, because that doesn't really fulfill our mission that much. Just getting people from around the country to click on something. But yeah, we do monitor it as a guide to see what kind of things that what do people want more of.
Yeah. How much of your business model, in terms of print versus online through the website versus social online, in terms of the business model there, is it a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, or what's the split of I'll say viewership / readership, depending on what the
I
story
think
is?
that the readership is actually the number of people who encounter the paper is about 100,000 a month, and that's about how many people go to the website a month. And there's probably similar as far as readership. As far as like revenue, it's almost it's 90% in print, and that's I think that's what makes us unique, is being able to have that. It's a convenient weekly recap of everything that happened in the town. So
yeah, and I think it's interesting now that I've kind of unpacked a little bit at my own brain. We were talking earlier about the multimedia concepts of delivering news, whether that be through a website with a Flagler Live, or through the radio here at Flagler Radio, or through the print model of the Observer. But then internally within the Observer, you've got multiple different platforms as well: the print versus the observer.com versus the Observer on Facebook, and the Observer on Twitter, and the Observer on Instagram Reels, and all the other opportunities for.
We also have a pretty strong email presence. We send out daily emails. You can sign up for those for free on our website. And we're actually about to start where you can get the e-edition and some updates by text message. And we're going to, start broadcasting that and advertising that. So,
well, that's fantastic. I'm thrilled with your growth. I think the most important thing, to go back to what you said earlier about, the success of our community, is because people are well informed of the issues. And you and your team, I applaud you for covering the local stories, number one, in multiple methods, multiple ways, and just trying to educate our community so we can all improve and get better. So thanks for your time today. I appreciate learning more and kind of unpacking the Observer a little bit more in depth.
Thank you very much, and thanks for what you're doing. The Chamber is an institution in so many communities, and I'm glad that we have one here, and that you guys are working to provide opportunities to support the economy.
Yeah, we are continuing to grow at the Palm Coast Flagler Regional Chamber of Commerce. And again, we serve the city of Palm Coast, we serve Bunnell, we serve Flagler Beach, we serve Beverly Beach, and we serve the town of Marineland as well. All 5 municipalities here in Flagler County are part of our chamber, and this has been the Chamber Business Report. Thanks to Brian McMillan from the Observer for being with us, and thanks again to our sponsors from Klein Construction, Smart Technologies, Intracoastal Bank, and also Katz & Green. This is the Chamber Business Report. We'll see you next week. Thank you.